I learned to be quiet.
Yeah.
Thank God. About time, dude. Fish More Gooder with Tim and Dave.
Welcome everyone back to Fish More Gooder. We're very excited to have Michael Leytem and Ryan Tucker with us from Catching Leadership. If you caught our last podcast, you would have heard Ryan Tucker talk all about Lake of the Ozarks, Big Bass Bash, what to throw, water temperatures. It was fantastic. But we are here to fulfill on our promise that we said during the last podcast that we are going to have a podcast on catching leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a pleasure to have Ryan back on and Michael joining us. Correct me if I'm wrong, boys. Ryan, you are in the sales department of Catching Leadership.
I am Dave, and Tim. I'm the sales director for Catching Leadership. I've been on board with Catching Leadership for, Michael, what is it, 6 months, 7 months?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a pretty crazy story. I won't go into it. I want to, but it's been a lot of fun. So, yep, I've been over here for a little while.
Absolutely. And Michael, so you are the author of Catching Leadership. You are the CEO of the company. We're excited to hear about everything that involves leadership growth through the analogy of fishing. I think anyone listening to this podcast right now, fishing is something we know, something we love enough that if you're a father, you're excited to share it with your children when they're old enough to understand what it means to be a fisherman, not just go out and cast a line. So, I mean, my first question is how? What brings on the idea or how do you even get started going, especially you're a younger guy, leadership is something we think of, leadership, wisdom, something, you need years and years of experience to obtain and to perfect. How does a younger gentleman go about going, I think I can inspire people to be a leader, and I think I can do it through something I'm extremely passionate about, which is fishing. So I don't know if that's a what or a how. I got like 45 questions in my head. So I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop right there and let's roll. Let's go into it.
Yeah, awesome stuff. There's probably a why in there too. Why catching leadership, your passion, your purpose. Always start with that, right? So a couple of things you brought up right off the bat, which is age, right? A lot of times we think you have to be the old wise man or woman, right, to earn your stripes. And there's definitely truth to that. Look, I'll be the first one to admit I have a lot to learn in the leadership space. The beauty of life is that you're always learning if you have an open mind, right? But ever since I was young, I've always been a sponge. And people would always be like, Michael, you're wise beyond your years. And I'm not saying that to be like arrogant, but it's just because I always paid attention. I have two older brothers, so I always felt like I was getting things a little bit faster, maybe more exposure at times, for better, for worse in a lot of cases. But I've just always loved people, and I've always loved history, and I've always loved the outdoors. And I've always been told, and like many of you have been told, follow what lights you up, follow your passion, follow your dreams. And fishing, as you know, like there's just something so special about it. And you bring up, going out with your father or your grandfather, maybe it's your mother or grandmother. In Tucker's case, it was your grandmother, which is a cool story in and of itself too. But I even write about it in the book about my father and the patience that it required for him to take a little kid who's getting bird's nests, who's getting tangled up, can we go home? Yeah, we're not catching anything. But there are so many leadership lessons just in that in and of itself as a young kid, if you're willing to pay attention and reflect upon it as you get older. So, yeah, I can go into the journey about my background and how I came up with the inception of the idea, but those are a few initial thoughts.
And I mean, I bet you that's one too, where if we go into it, probably be a whole separate hour conversation about what led up to you making the decision to go, you know what, I think I have a plan, and I think right now is the best time to execute that plan and put it onto paper. I bet at that time it'd probably be an hour conversation just right.
Can I do it in a minute? Can I try and do it in a minute?
You can try.
For it.
All right.
Go
so
for it.
that
Get it.
exactly. You're talking about being
Timer's
a young.
going.
Okay. If you talk about being a young man, and I even was younger then, I was 22 at the time. And I had the idea. I was on the University of Iowa bass fishing team, and I said, I love psychology. I love fishing. There's a lot going on underneath the water. How can I draw all these parallels together? And I got the liquid courage one night after going out with my buddies to go message one of the professors who I was working as a TA underneath doing some research for her. And I said, I got this great idea. I want to write a book. I want to do it now. And the next morning, she gets it back to me in an email and says, Michael, it looks like by the timestamp on this message that you were having some fun last night. I was like, yikes. She said, I think the idea is a good one, but can I offer you some advice? And she said, why don't you go get your credentials first, go get some experience. So I held on to that thought for about 10 years and I let it kind of marinate on its own and picked up stories. And then I turned 30 and my wife gave me the nudge and said, I think it's time. And I said, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready for all the reasons you already said at the beginning. She's like, you're ready. And then I just started writing it out and it came out when I turned 32.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I will circle back to the whole, life lessons. Dave and I had plenty of talks about doing podcasts, fishing with our dads, or now it could just be fishing with your elders and the lessons you learn during that.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
I learned to be quiet.
Yeah.
Thank God. About time, dude. I've been waiting. We've been friends since T-ball. I've been waiting for that sentence my whole life. Oh, good grief. Good grief. So, all right. So now let's bring it back. Let's reel it back in. Let's reel it back in. Yep. So, all right. So when someone dives full force into catching leadership, what should they expect to learn? What should they expect to come away from after going through reading the book? I know scavenging around the website and everything like that. There's leadership retreats, which I've been on for my own job. I've been on leadership retreats. They're good. They allow you to isolate and focus on actual tasks without getting caught up in the corporate email.
Yeah, so I think the main question we get at first is what anglers am I attracting to read the book, right? And when I say anglers, I always use it synonymous with leaders and who can get some value from it. And so there's a little bit of a gamble that I take by leaning into the fishing piece because even though a lot of people fish, a lot of people might be turned off immediately and say, this is a leadership book, but it's not for me because I'm not an avid angler outdoors person. But you don't have to be. That's the beauty. So there is something in this book for absolutely everyone. And I wrote it in a way that uses psychological principles, experiences, and stories, but just uses the fishing metaphors to make it catchy, pun intended,
Perfect.
So that people remember, and hopefully it does encourage them to pick up a rod and reel and get outside too. Because in the world we live in with the distractions, disruption, technology, stress, anxiety, burnout, people need more fish therapy in their life. Imagine the way you feel when you come off the boat, whether you catch fish or don't, like you're just in a better mood and it lowers the temperature, if you will. So I wrote about it because it marries my passions of leadership, psychology, and fishing together. Of course, if you have some of those same passions, you're going to really dig it. But even if you don't, and you can lean into it with a novel perspective, you'll say, wow, that's pretty cool. And maybe I understand why people are so into fishing now. Like I kind of get it a little bit more of why they fall in love with it.
I'll add a little bit into that as well, is that there's so many people that I interact with on a daily basis that really haven't had the opportunity to go out and put the rod and reel in their hand, but they're so curious about it because they know myself or they know you, Michael, or Tim or Dave. They're like, what do you get out of it? And they go and they do their day-to-day work, and they could be leaders. They could be frontline, individual contributors, if you will. But they always come back to the curiosity part of it is like, how do you fish? And then they have kids, and the kids start to come up and they say, I'm curious about this. And so I have a lot of friends that come to me and say, can you just help me? Can you help me understand how you do this, or like how you tie on a hook, or what baits do I throw? And I know we're going to get into that later, but it's the curiosity. And I think it really comes down to the fact that they just want to go outside with their family, their friends, and experience something that's away from work, right? And the everyday grind that we all go through.
Absolutely.
100%. And Michael, cut me off if I'm jumping too far ahead, but I was going to talk about the disconnect that we've talked about before when it comes to fishing and actually, like, you know, taking time for yourself. And I was going to call Dave out a little bit on that one. We were fishing the other day. As I was sitting there casting line, he's over there on his phone. Work call, work call, work call.
Oh, after hours too. I got berated after hours on stuff. And it was you know what? It sometimes, you know, you got to take them. And sometimes, you know, one thing I've learned through my own leadership growth is, and I probably should have done it then, but it was like, I was in one of those moods where I was like, I'm just taking them. Is part of being a leader is knowing when to say no. And no is not, you're not abusing no, but there's also a no where it's, hey, this could have been requested at an appropriate time when maybe my brain is more facilitated around the objection of getting work done right now. So it's like I heard one of the best things I ever heard was, why would you schedule a doctor's appointment at the end of a day? The doctor's burnt out. Get your ass out of bed. Be the first appointment. The doctor's well rested. They're refreshed. They're going to give you better advice. So why procrastinate and wait till after work hours to ask that important question? Go to the doctor in the morning. Get good advice. You know, get prescribed a dose of your medication, you know?
But Dave, can you apply that to yourself then? Why were you taking work
Only
calls so late in the
bro.
day? They're all
Only
burnt out. The questions are going to be horrible. They're not going to turn it off, right?
Yeah, I know. But that's the hard part too is, you know, and especially when you're doing something like, and I'm sure you get people that go to the retreats and whatnot where, you know, like I love what I do. So the hard part is turning it off when you're passionate about it, or you're passionate about your team enough to be like, no, but they're my team. I need to help them. Like if they're asking me, I need to maybe not fulfill their ask, but hear their ask, because it matters to me that they know that I'm here for them, which is being a good leader. But also you can't be so selfless that you have no personal life.
Yes. And being a good leader means role modeling how to turn it off so they feel like they can turn it off too.
Right. You do. Yep. Yeah, you got me on that one, Michael.
Gotcha.
That's good though. No, but it's true. It's true. You know, and I think some of it's kind of crazy where, I mean, it's not necessarily common sense stuff, but it's one of those things where there's so many ways to distract from the, like your answer right there. It's not a difficult answer, but it's never an answer that immediately comes to the front of your brain. And, you know, it's not something you accept immediately. And it's not difficult to come up with the line of reasoning, but it's not difficult to formulate it, but it's difficult to accept it and then follow through with it. And, you know, because you could do it once, but then the next day, do you still answer the phone when you're sitting at dinner? You know, because a lot of people would say, oh, no, I still answered. It worked for 2 days and I didn't follow through. I wasn't consistent with the coaching.
It takes roughly 21 days to make habits happen. And look, life, the way it is complex, and you're going to at times take the call. I'm not saying that you have to be a saint and never not take the call.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But what you just said there is when you're in a reactive mode and you're taking calls all day long, you're stressed out and you're in fight or flight, and like it's just a reactionary thing, versus when your head is clean, like when you're out on the water and you can breathe and you can be mindful, you can say, nope, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm fishing with my buddies. We have this trip, or I'm with my grandfather. This is more important. I will get back that and I'll bust my rear when the time comes. But right now I'm doing this one thing and I'm doing it really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dave, I got a question for you.
Go for it.
So how was your experience when you were taking calls the whole time you were out fishing?
I still call it the first fish.
Crap.
But, you know,
I was hoping that was not
we all
gonna
have
come
goals,
up.
right?
Yes.
But coming from my experience is that sometimes you feel like you're stealing a little time, right? But you feel a little bit of guilt. You feel like, you know, like you're not completely plugged in on both sides. So the experience, and I've had this happen where it's like, I want to be out here, but I'm just half-assing it, right? Like I'm just halfway there. And at the end of the day, you get off the water, you're like, man, that could have been so much better. And I've done it so many times. And so being over here at Catching Leadership, but getting to know Michael, I'm still trying to work through it, right? Like I'm still trying to, and it's a work in progress. It's never going to be a flip of the switch, back to Michael's point. But I think we all get away from it and say, we just need that release. We need to be able to get away from it. And how you do it, like setting those parameters and setting the guidelines within your team, is so helpful.
Yeah. And one thing that really, when you were just talking, what really comes to mind is, we're probably not all the same age, but we're probably in the same age bracket. Like if a marketer looked at us, we're all the same demographic. And I think right now in the world, especially in the US, there's a the older generation is phasing out of work in a good amount of industries. And what's left are, I think people like us that are, it's important to take every call, because that's your value right now, because you don't have the experience and the knowledge to maybe do things more efficiently. You just kind of have to work harder than the person next to you. But then also we all have young kids, Yeah. I got a baby on the way. Like me and Tim went out after work, you answer like my scenario. I spent 15, 20 minutes on the phone and texting and sending a work email from the water. But I have a baby at home. I have a pregnant wife at home. They got to eat dinner. So now so what, you only wasted 15, 20 minutes, but I was only allotted an hour and a half, maybe an hour to do something that I'm passionate about. So really it's, 15 minutes is nothing, but 15 minutes of 60 minutes, that's a quarter of the time I should have been able to enjoy my passion was now just sucked out.
I was really curious
if I was going to get the ratio
how well
right.
Dave was going to be able to do math right there. And he started changing numbers, and then he's dropped it to an hour to go 15 minutes. Like, okay.
Dude, I did. I'm not going to lie. I had to cut it to an hour because I know 15 is a quarter of an hour. I don't know what it is. I don't know the math. You have 90 minutes, dude. I know 90 minutes is an hour and a half, I hope, but I don't know what the ratio of 15 over 90 is. Do it, Tim. Yeah. Do it in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1.
17.5.
I don't know if he's right or wrong, but I'm just going to say he's right. I don't know.
So confident.
Yeah. But realistically though, that's where a lot of people our age are, is, you only have so much time to do things when you have to fulfill the roles of employee, worker, boss, father, husband, friend, brother, 15 minutes is a lot of time.
So I'll gladly accept the fact that I'm the oldest, right? Like, and probably by, I'm guessing 10 to 15 years. I don't know. I'm 46 years old. My first bosses coming into the healthcare arena were West Point grads, right? Like, and back to your point, it's, show up, get it done. Like if you're, 5 minutes, and my dad was a Marine, it's like, if you're 5 minutes early, you're late, and to your point, that's a lot of the generation that is starting to phase out. But there's a lot of us that are still in the workforce that are leaders and that have been, that are still a part of this, that have new, hungry executives coming into the workforce that candidly, like, it's a different style that you have to manage to and lead. And it's okay, because the productivity can be the same, if not better. But I think you have to start to like get away from the fact that this is how it is, and this is how it's always going to be, and this is how I was taught, right? You have to be open to ideas. And I think that's why I appreciate so much being over at Catching Leadership, is the fact that there's a mindfulness piece of this. And if we go out and we talk to anybody in any type of facilitation, and Michael, you can step in here, but when it comes down to it, all of these folks are working so hard, and they're carrying a ton of different bags, trying to get all this work done. But at the end of the day, they need to go have a release part of this, right? And that's part of the book. And they need to be able to go out and enjoy themselves and have work go away for a little bit, re-energize, come back in, and then take over the task. They're still committed, and it's okay for them to go ahead and unplug, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a little bit different from the folks that I was led by that are starting to phase out, where it's just like, just go get it done. I don't want to hear about your free time. I don't want to talk about any of that. I just want to talk about the task at hand. So it's different, but I think it's still super productive. We just have to be open to have the conversation at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
As leaders, we just have to be open to ask them from a personal standpoint, what is important to you and what do you need to be more productive outside of your place of business and inside your place of business.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can have that candid conversation and be truthful with each other and communicate, you're going to be fine. Michael, I'm sorry, I just went on a tangent, but
that was a good
But,
tangent.
I love it because I love that part about the mindfulness that you just brought up about catching leadership. Because when we had our pre-call, Michael brought that part up, saying how that's a big part of it. And, you know, I just loved hearing about that. So I'm glad that this was a nice segue into that part as well, where, you know, you do have to literally, I mean, mindfulness, be mindful of everything. You know, how much time are you spending doing work? How much time are you spending with your family? How much time are you taking for yourself, just all together as a whole? And how healthy are you being as a leader with all of that?
It's so important, Tim. It's spot on. And I think we need to all challenge ourselves on this pod and everyone listening that regardless of what has happened in the last 20 years with the boomers and, with us and us finding ourselves in this kind of wedge right now, the world is going to drastically change with AI in the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, taking phone calls the way that we are in the grind. So a lot of things will be automated that we can't even fathom right now in our day-to-day lives. But you know what won't change? Our ability to lead human beings. Mm-hmm. And so I always say double down on humanistic traits that you can. Leadership is so important. Communication, setting boundaries, being mindful. A computer doesn't know how to be mindful. It just does tasks, right? Mm-hmm. But when you have an organization that's going to say, let's say, be half robots, half human, and you got to work together, you can put certain inputs into computer code. Those inputs won't work in the human brain. And so I think we just all have to challenge ourselves to start picking up these healthy habits now. And I know I was challenging Dave a little bit ago about it because it's not sustainable. We know stress and burnout. And this doesn't mean you don't work hard. This doesn't mean that you don't take risks and don't put yourself out there in your career. But you're not going to be able to grind the same way that you did 20 or 40 years ago and climb the ladder because the game is changing completely right now, right before our eyes with technology.
Oh, yeah. And think about it, too. Like, you grind, you work 15 hours a day for 5-10 years, and then it's still not enough. And why? Because you're good at grinding, but you're not good at communicating. Or you're not good at understanding the request and facilitating the most efficient way to process it and resolve it, because some of that stuff it's not grind related at all. It's great to have a good, strong work ethic, but it's also really, really good to be mindful and aware and adaptive and perseverant and also, empathetic and understanding to what's going on for you to make good judgment calls on even, what you're going to do or who you ask for help, God forbid you, it could.
It's right.
And it all adds up.
I promise we're going to get to the catch and release model because it's like on the tip of my tongue and I want to get into it.
All right, hey, let's shut up and let's dive in.
Jump in.
Well,
yes. Don't let Dave and I just monopolize. Jump
I will
in.
say
we
this.
want to see it.
I've worked at some big firms too. And, that whole grinding 15 hours a day and whatnot. What happens to Dave, what you're saying is you then retire and your life changes almost completely. You don't know what to do with yourself. And even though we think we could go fishing all the time and be great, it doesn't feel the same as it does right now when we can't go all the time, or if it's golf, if that's your thing or whatever. But what would happen is people would exchange their hours and their health for wealth. And now you're 65 and retired and you say, I grinded, I worked, but no one at that organization really remembers you the next year once you're gone. I hate to say it. Like, they don't remember the contracts you sold 5 years ago. But they will remember how you treated the people. They will remember the wisdom you bestowed on when they had a problem and you listened to them. So I always say that's what you're going to be remembered by. Your legacy is going to be the way you lead people and the way you made them feel when they worked.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And or even think, in the last 2 years, how many leadership changes have occurred at really big companies? the minute there's a big major leadership change, the fact that you were a winner yesterday didn't mean the same when the person doesn't even know who you are that's now in charge of some of that stuff. It doesn't mean don't work hard or whatnot, but it doesn't resonate the same.
Exactly.
Which is
all right,
wild.
gentlemen. I'm going to share my screen and dive into the catch and release model here. So the book, here's what it looks like. It's on Amazon.
Hang on one quick second because it's still loading on our side.
Okay.
And we'll let there it is. All right, jackpot.
Cool. So here's the book. This is what it looks like, and it is on Amazon. Go snag a copy yourself. It came out March of 2020, which is a crazy time for it to come out. I thought I was going to go on a book tour and shake some hands, and I had to get pretty adaptive myself and lead some virtual sessions. But the content in here, the catch and release model, which I trademarked, has stood the test of time through the pandemic. And I would argue that it's even more widely accepted now because of what we all went through, especially with that release component. So what is the catch and release model? I take the readers on a journey. There's 6 stops on the lake here, 6 major dimensions within the model. But within those 6 chapters, there are 34 leadership sub-constructs, if you will. So these are like 1 to 2 page little nuggets based on various leadership topics. Many of them you've heard, and some of them will be brand new. And then I also wanted to create extra value for the reader by creating a free assessment that you can take at catchingleadership.com. So before you even purchase the book, set aside 15 minutes, be truthful with yourself. This is not a test that you're trying to ace. This is something where you want to say, if I can be honest with myself, maybe I can glean some new light in some areas that I'm strong, but some areas that maybe I can work on to accelerate my leadership growth. So the 6 steps within the model, or the 6 chapters, if you will. The first one, cast your line. This is about walking down the dock before you're even on the boat and casting a line for the first time. And if you remember, if you've grabbed a bait caster for the first time or a fly rod and reel for the first time, you're going to suck at first. You just are. I mean, that's the same with leadership. You don't roll out of bed just being a great leader one day. It takes time and practice and reflection and saying, what am I good at? What am I naturally not good at? What do I need to work on? And you start figuring a few things out. You snag your line, or you get a bird's nest, or you get a hook in the hand, and you think, I better not do that again. You learn your lesson. So chapter 1 is all about the fundamentals of leadership and really getting real with where you stand today before you move on to chapter 2, which is titled Attract Diverse Anglers. Anglers, obviously we know what that means, but for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, it's another name for fishermen, fisherwomen, but I use it synonymously with leaders, people who are go-getters, people who want to get out there and fish for themselves. And the key word here is diverse. So when you're, manning a leadership boat, if you will, do you just surround it with your beer drinking buddies? What are you going to learn if that's the case in your leadership journey? You should be surrounding yourself with people who come with different tackle boxes, different ideas and concepts of maybe where to go on the lake, or, hey, we always fish for bass. Let's maybe try for walleye, or let's try for crappie. And you'll learn so much more, and it'll round out all of your leadership ability. So you make the relationship mutually beneficial for one another. You challenge each other's biases. You shouldn't be, surrounding yourself with people who always talk like you do, vote the same way you do, go to the same church as you do, because you're going to limit your growth if you do that. The next step then, the T in catch and release, is tie their knot. Now you've brought these leaders on your boat. Some of them may be new. They're new to angling, or they're new to leadership, if you will. Are you okay as a leader setting your own pole down to tie the knot for someone else? And this can cause a lot of cognitive dissonance. And this is what, maybe your father, grandfather, or someone in your family did for you when you were young. But if they wouldn't have been intentional with tying your knot, you would have never gotten the game. So how can you see the big picture, the strategic outlook? How can you delay gratification and catching the big fish today in the hopes that maybe you both catch fish, tomorrow? So after you've tied this new angler's knot, can you coach their cast? Now, coaching is such a huge part of leadership. You've probably been hearing that for a long time. How do you coach your team? How do you provide feedback? But the key word here is coach their cast. I may think that I'm great as a leader and that, wow, if Dave and Tim could just be a little more like Michael, wouldn't the world be a better place? But that would be the wrong mindset to have. I need to take the time when I'm observing you fishing or leading out on the water and figure out what you're good and not good at and coach to your strengths and offer you feedback to work on your development areas. And coaching comes down to asking really thoughtful questions, instilling ownership, like I said, feedback, and discovering learning opportunities. So now that I brought you on the boat, I've taken the time as a leader to tie your knot. I've been coaching your cast for a while. You're getting in the game. Lo and behold, you start catching bigger fish than me. Am I okay with that as a leader, or does it challenge my ego? You start bringing in bigger contracts. Do I have to sit there and whine and pout and say, oh my gosh, if I wouldn't have brought you into my boat and tied your knot and coached your cast, you'd never be there? That's not what great leaders do, right? Great leaders are able to say, good job. You did this. I'm proud of you, and I want what's best for you. They truly honor individuals. And if that means even moving up and surpassing them within their organization or moving on to new opportunities outside of their organization, that doesn't bother the leader because they know that's ultimately what's best for that individual. And hopefully they're having ongoing conversations so that they're not surprised by a decision like that anyway. Last, and certainly not least, is the release. So throughout this process, or throughout life in general, shit's going to happen. It just is. People are going to say things to you. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to get hooked in the hand. Things are going to happen. But how quickly can you let them go? If you're holding on to labels or nicknames or things that people said to you in high school, at some point, that's not on the people from high school anymore. That's on you. So you have to learn how to release, how to be mindful, how to be intentional, how to change the story. Here's a great statistic for you. A human will have 50 to 60,000 conscious thoughts a day. And that's not subconscious. This conscious thoughts, meaning like, hey, when's this podcast going to get over? Hey, am I making sense right now? Am I connecting with the audience? I'm hungry right now, whatever that might be. And of those 50 to 60,000 conscious thoughts a human has in a given day, 90% are repetitive. So that means we're telling ourselves these same stories and loops all day long. But if they're not serving us as a leader, and these are negative loops that we get into, it's time to cut the cord, and it's time to change that out with stories that actually pump you up, build you up, and make you a better person. So release, obviously catch and release in the angling community, you know how important it is to sustainability. But from a leadership standpoint, the release is what's going to be what prevents burnout. If you're going to be at your career for 40 years and you don't learn how to be mindful and how to take breaks and how to do things in a sustainable way, you'll never last. So in a nutshell, that is the catch and release model. I will pause there and get your guys' comments and insights on this.
What's crazy is, especially as an angler, as a fisherman, and as an angler, as a leader or a future leader or whichever, for each of the six, there's a connection of a work memory and there's a connection of a fishing memory. Because it's like when you went into, oh my goodness, it was 2 or 3 diversifying.
Track diverse anglers.
Diverse angler. My first thought was, you're like, do you always just go on a boat with your buddies? And I was like, it's really fun to go on a boat with your buddies and drink beer. It is. And you'd be a liar if you said it isn't fun. But also, it's really good to be on a boat, and it's a lot of fun to be on a boat with someone who's really good at flipping jigs. Someone who's really good at working a jerkbait or a crankbait, and someone who's really, really good to just try that one weird creature bait. If the goal in fishing is, let's get the biggest bag and win a tournament, or let's figure out how we can catch the most fish as quickly as possible. You don't have everybody throw a swim jig, or you don't have everybody throw a spinner bait, unless that's what's working. Dave.
Is what I love is every chapter, it's really, each one is like a step you have to take in that leadership. And that's how it's broken out, where every one isn't easy. Every one is a big step you need to take and commit to.
Yeah.
and focus on.
I think it's really important too.
So like how
I think it's really important too, Tim, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, is to think about, even if you're not in a leadership position, if you will, we're all leaders in our life. At the end of the day, you lead your family, you lead your friends, right? Tim, you either led Dave to the spot, or Dave, you led Tim to the spot. I'll let you guys argue about that.
I've been leading Dave since T-ball.
Way to go, Ryan. Here we
I'm
go.
sorry, I opened up
Here
the
we
can
go.
of worms, but at the end of the day, like, we can give ourselves titles. Before I came over to Catching Leadership, I was in a leadership position, right? But when I look at it and when I read the book, I started thinking about all the times that I was leading a team, but they may not directly report to me, but you guys are in sales. And so there is a sales operations that happens. There's people internally that don't necessarily work for you, don't report to you. But if you don't help lead that group and get them on your side, your sales will not go up. They will go down. If you don't get them on your team and you don't collaborate and you don't build trust, all the things that the Catching Leadership book talks about, then ultimately you will fail, and you will fail at an individual standpoint. Even though you're not considered a leader, right? Because you don't have people reporting to you. And that's what I tell people, a lot of folks that I talk to, is that it doesn't matter if you have the title or not. You should read the book, because you're all leading throughout your every day, whether it be from a professional standpoint or from a personal standpoint.
And with that too, you don't need to be a manager of people for someone within your own organization, or someone that, even outside of your organization, to look at it and go, holy cow, that person has leadership potential.
Right.
Like, they have the potential to lead. Maybe they need better coaching. Maybe they need a little bit of manicuring. But, you don't need to have people under you and be a manager to have someone look at you and go, oh, wow, they're actually really good at being a leader around other people, which is huge. That's massive right there.
Yep. So true.
And that's back to the model too, and using the fishing metaphor again, like, you all know what it's like when you can go out there and just catch big fish, you know where they are. And then someone's like, hey, I want to go with you. And all of a sudden, maybe you had dreams of being able to do both, but you're like, again, I have to focus. Am I doing one or the other? Am I tying their knot and coaching them today? And it means that I might not catch any fish. I'm cool with that. If they catch a couple dinks, but that makes them ecstatic, then that's what my intention, and that's what I'm being mindful of today. But when you try and play both games, in leadership or in fishing, you end up frustrated because you don't really do a good job in either.
Oh, yeah.
So, Michael, one thing I want to jump into with Catching Leadership as we move on is, it's not just a book. There's more to it. There's the retreats. So just give us a little flavor, give us a little tease about what some of these retreats entail. We
do fishing on the retreats, right? You
Absolutely.
have to. That's the book.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We do fish.
Right. So I'm going to get to the retreats, but I just want to give this a little bit of caveat out there too. If anyone is listening, you're at an organization. Most companies spend a lot of money on training or leadership, or if you're an executive, executive coaching. And we do all of that at Catching Leadership. So we have that model. We can dial down the fishing stuff a little bit if you want. But what I find, like, what really lights me up and what is unique is getting out on the water. So imagine having a few coaching calls or a few workshops ahead of time. They say, now we want to go practice what we're preaching when it comes to being mindful, or coaching someone's cast, or tying strong knots, aka relationships, maybe in your organization, because they'll fail if you don't check in on them. So the retreats are a beautiful way for people to get outside of the box, to take some of that time to focus on their legacy and what they're actually trying to do. The number one question when I get into an executive coaching conversation that I ask people up front are not, what are your goals? Which 95% of the coaches probably ask. I say, what are your dreams and what do you want in life? And you'd be shocked how many people can't answer what they want in life. They'll tell you what they don't want till they're blue in the face. But what you focus on grows, right? I don't want to hear that you don't want to be miserable. You don't want to be like your dad who worked too much, or you don't want to live there, or whatever. I want to know what lights you up, what stretches you, and what gives you butterflies. Now let's work on on those things, right? So getting back to the retreats, that allows the space and the time to let some of the day-to-day hustle bustle, let your guard down a little bit. Nature, as you know, lowers cortisol levels. It improves your health. You listen to things that you maybe don't pay attention to when you don't have to worry about work, the birds. As a fly fisherman, I pay attention to the hatches going on, and it just takes it to the next level of observing your environment. Every day is different. You know that on the water. Mm-hmm. No 2 days in life and no 2 days in leadership are ever the same when you walk into that organization. But you have to think about it, and you have to be mindful about what you're actually trying to accomplish that day. So the retreats, they're typically 2 to 3 night excursions, but they're kind of bougie because when you're dealing with executives and leaders, like you're not sleeping on the ground in tents. Like sometimes people think like, I'm not going in there and getting bit by a bunch of mosquitoes. So we find nice resorts where there's like nice cabins, and we can either cater in the food or we can cook. And that can be part of it too, of like, how do you eat healthy as a leader? And we have fun too, right? It's not just this like military style, you're going to eat and sleep 8 hours. Like we do have adult beverages at night and we have fun too. There's a balance, just like anything in life. There's a social component. But when it comes to the actual activities at the retreats, there's some journaling that you do, spend some quiet time reflecting. There's some meditations if you've done that or haven't, to learn how to do that. There are some group coaching sessions where it's not just listen to Michael, he's got all the answers, but there's a ton of knowledge and experience in this room. You all start helping each other out and answering questions. And I can relate to you because I've been there. And then, of course, there's some fishing activities. And I like to bust into fly fishing because it typically is like puts everyone on like the same level, like a blank slate.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're like, what the hell? And isn't it this mystique and hard thing? And it's like a river runs through it and they start thinking of what it's going to be like. And it's usually not like that because in life, our expectations are rarely the realities, right? But anyway, I talk about different bugs. I talk about the casting techniques and I talk about the mechanism. And then we get to the water where there's actually the water running through. You hear, and it just puts you in this meditative flow-like state where you're concentrating really hard on the casting and on the technique that you can't even possibly worry about the stresses that you normally swirl in your brain. And then we come back and we unpack it. And whether you catch fish, don't catch fish, you snag, your buddy caught more than you, we say, all right, what's the lesson that you needed to learn from that? Now, how do you apply that back to your family, back to work, and unpack it? And then, hey, take the book and continue on your own journey, reading through it and working through a number of different exercises. But the retreats are definitely unique and cool. And some people get it and they're like, this is really awesome. Other people are like, you want to do what? And I'm like, you just got to come and check it out. I promise you won't be disappointed.
Absolutely. And there's something too with that. You don't have to be a fisherman to enjoy it, because to get out of your own head, you almost need to put yourself in a position you'd maybe never put yourself in. So maybe you're not a fisherman. Well, guess what? Now you're fly fishing. That's way out of your element to where you almost have to go, all right, I have to shut up and listen to everything because I have no idea what I'm doing now. So I just I have to absorb to survive, to make it through this thing, which, and I'm sure when that happens, I'm sure you could see it on somebody's faces where it's like, oh, nice. He's ready to listen to what we really want to say to people. There's got to be something where it's like you can just see it like, oh, perfect. We got to him and he's ready to understand like some of the more intense concepts about what it means to be an exemplary leader. I just used the biggest word I've used in like 6 months.
I do want to piggyback off that, for at least one final thought of, Michael, you've been doing this for a while. I want to hear, has there been an aha moment or someone like Dave described who just, walked in and was like, meh, I don't know what, but then
I'm
by
sure
the
you
end,
get that
you
too.
just saw that 180 change.
And it happens every retreat.
Every retreat.
It does. It does. It looks a little different. It's never exactly the same, but people don't know what to expect. And I think that's the great like paradox of it all. And the paradox of life is like you come in, maybe with what you think fly fish or what a leadership or a mindfulness retreat's going to be like. You're like, God, are they going to make me do yoga? And are they going to be like, and yeah, there might be an option. If you wanted practice of yoga, we could teach you how to do some of that. But like, it's just so cool because in life, think about how many times your brain told you a story that ended up not being the reality. You thought it was going to be way worse than it was.
Oh, yeah.
You thought it was going to be this way or whatever. And it's not like that, but it's still its own beautiful experience, and you take something away. I had people who've like never fished before, and I always bring different fishing line, and I'm teaching them different knots, and they get into it. And they start like, okay, I got that one. Michael, show me this one. Show me this one. And I'm like, so are you going to plan to fly fish? Like, I'm like, yeah, maybe I might. But even if they never do, like they were still invested in that task and learning something new. That's almost like a survival technique in a way of like learning basic knots, right? There's something primitive that is in our DNA about fishing, angling. And it's also something that cuts through many, many cultures. If you're by water, it was part of your culture. It doesn't matter if you're in the Far East, in Scandinavia, in South America, in North America, like, so, and the beautiful thing too, and I know bass fish, trust me, I love bass fishing. I do. But fly fishing takes it to another level too, because you can't just like muscle your way. Like there is such a finesse and a technique and a balance and like the yin and the yang of things in life and like just being in that. And a lot of times people who maybe aren't the biggest, fastest, strongest in life, so maybe some women, maybe some children, they can pick it up quicker. And that'll kind of make the guy frustrated as used to catching 5-pound bass. And they're like, this is stupid. Give me my bait caster back. But it's like, that's the lesson you need to learn, man. Yeah. You need to, so anyway, I can go on and on.
He's talking to me.
And, and before we get too much, we said it from the beginning. We don't want to give it all away. We don't want to go way too far into it where, you know everything. So I think we did a good overview here,
There was a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff. It's like, my gears are turning in my brain thinking.
There's a lot
about stuff that
there's a lot going on
up
here, which if you ask Dave, that doesn't happen too often, but there's a lot of gears turning.
Yeah. The worker bee. Yeah. Oh, man.
Well, one thing I wrote and I stayed true to myself was one of the last pages in the book, because when I wrote Catching Leadership, I was primarily a bass fisherman. I would fish from kayaks, from bass boats, whatever. And I knew that I had to challenge myself. And I just say, what has been shared with you so far is kind of think of it as a fishing report. But rest assured, there'll be more to come. In the meantime, I need to head back to the dock to relearn how to cast my own line. I've decided there's still much for me to learn in the world of leadership and fishing. To expand my own horizons, I've decided to take up fly fishing, a casting technique I know little about. I honor this opportunity and look forward to developing in a completely new way, one cast, snag, and tangled line at a time. I will be catching leadership and invite you to do the same. So I didn't know anything about fly fishing 2-3 years ago, and it just made me a novice again. And I love anything in life that kind of humbles you, puts you back in your place, and gives you that beautiful thing called perspective.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'll even say, even bass fishing, Dave and I both, we started throwing cranks up the shore for the first time this year. Never done it. We never caught anything. We never tried it before, but this year we both started trying.
Yeah. And it's the only thing that's working right now. And I've spent 33 years not doing it and avoiding it. Lo and behold, it's what works in March and April.
You'll love my top 5 then.
Oh, boy.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm ready to get into that. We're
going to jump into that here soon. But before we do, literally want to thank Ryan and Michael both jumping on, talking catching leadership. You saw the book, check it out. Check out the retreats. You can find out more. CatchingLeadership.com. Super easy.
You can find it below. Well, it's all going to be below. Read the description.
Well, I'm going to quit pointing just down that way because
all right. That's got to get that out. Anyway, guys, thank you so much.
Fish Mo Gooder with Tim and Dave.